The massive metal doors of the debriefing room slid shut with a heavy thud. Commander Zefkar sat at the center of the circular table, his dark green skin gleaming under the bright lights. His 4 yellow eyes moved slowly around the room, looking at each of his fellow officers. The scars on his thick, armored body told stories of dozens of battles across the galaxy. Around the table sat the best warriors from different alien worlds. There was Captain THYSS Andra, tall and thin like a walking stick, with a large brain visible through her clear skull. She could read minds and had never lost a battle. Next to her sat General Vorthon, covered in golden feathers and sharp claws, representing the proud Talon lords who valued honor above all else. The crystal beings called Shard People sat perfectly still, their bodies sparkling like diamonds, while their leader's voice came from somewhere inside his rock-like form. Zefkar had called this meeting. For the first time in his long military career, he needed to tell his friends something that would shock them. His large hands, each finger ending in a sharp claw, drummed nervously on the metal table. "My fellow commanders," Zefkar began, his voice deep and rough like grinding stones. "We have fought together for many years. You know me as a warrior who fears nothing." The other aliens nodded. Everyone in the galaxy knew Commander Zefkar. He had charged alone into a nest of void spiders that had killed hundreds of soldiers. He had fought the terrible Shadow Fleet with only basic weapons. He had stood face to face with creatures that ate entire planets and never backed down. "I have seen things that would make most beings run away screaming," Zefkar continued. "The crystal devourers who turn everything they touch into glass. The fire demons from the dead star systems. The nightmare swarm that feeds on fear itself." He paused and looked down at his hands. "But I have never been truly afraid. Not until 3 months ago." Captain THYSS Andra leaned forward, her huge brain pulsing with soft blue light. "Commander, what could possibly frighten the great Zefkar? Did you encounter some new enemy we have not heard about?" The room fell silent. Even the crystal people stopped their constant humming. General Vorthon's golden feathers stood up straight, a sign that he was very interested. Zefkar took a deep breath. "I fought alongside humans." The silence that followed was complete. No one moved. No one made a sound. Then, suddenly, several aliens started talking at once. "Impossible!" chirped General Vorthon, his voice high and sharp. "Humans are barely evolved creatures. Our intelligence reports say they just learned to travel between stars. They use primitive chemical rockets," added one of the crystal people, their voice like wind through caves. "They cannot even travel faster than light properly." Captain Tivisacendra's mental voice echoed in everyone's heads. "Our data shows they are simple mammals with basic tools. They still fight with metal projectiles and chemical explosives." Zefkar held up one large hand, and the room became quiet again. "That data is wrong. Very wrong. And believing it could get us all killed." He stood up from his chair, towering over the others. Even among aliens who came in all shapes and sizes, Zefkar was impressive. His thick arms could crush steel, and his armored skin could stop most weapons. 3 months ago, Kepler Station sent out a distress call. The Void Swarm had attacked without warning. You all know how dangerous they are. Those crystal monsters had already broken through the station's defenses. Hundreds of our people were dead or trapped. The other commanders nodded grimly. The Void Swarm was one of their worst enemies. Strange crystal beings that appeared from nowhere and destroyed everything in their path. "I led my best shock troops to evacuate the station," Zefkar continued. "We expected to find scared civilians and maybe a few survivors hiding in the lower levels." He paused, his 4 eyes seemed to look at something far away. "Instead, we found humans fighting back." "Fighting back?" General Vorthon seemed confused. "Against a Void Swarm? But they are just primitives." Zefkar's mandibles clicked together, a sign that he was remembering something unpleasant. "That is what I thought too, until I saw them in action." He began to pace around the room, his heavy footsteps echoing off the metal walls. "The first human I met was a medical officer named Miho. The station was falling apart around us. Void drones were cutting through the walls with plasma fire. The air itself was burning. Zethkar stopped walking and looked directly at Captain HFY Sasendra. This human was performing surgery on a wounded Talon Lord warrior, while enemy fire was hitting the walls just a few meters away. Brave, but not unusual, the mind reader replied. Many species show courage in battle. You do not understand, Zethkar said, shaking his large head. He was not being brave. He was not scared. He was just doing his job, like the battle was completely normal for him. The commander's voice grew quieter. When I asked him how he could stay so calm, he looked confused. He said it was just standard medical training. The room was quiet again, as the aliens tried to understand what their friend was telling them. 3 months earlier, the emergency signal from Kepler Station had cut through space like a knife. The message was short and terrifying. Void swarm attack. Heavy casualties. Need immediate help. Commander Zethkar had received the call while his ship was patrolling the outer rim of Coalition space. The Void Swarm was every soldier's nightmare. These crystal creatures appeared without warning, moving through space like angry insects. They could cut through the strongest metal with their razor-sharp bodies and plasma weapons. Worse, they seemed to enjoy causing pain and fear. Zethkar's ship, the Iron Claw, had jumped to hyperspace immediately. His crew of elite Velcran warriors prepared their weapons and armor during the journey. They expected to find a destroyed station, and maybe a few survivors hiding in emergency shelters. When they arrived at Kepler Station, the sight was worse than expected. Huge holes had been torn in the station's outer walls. Fires burned in several sections, and debris floated everywhere in the vacuum of space. The beautiful research station that had housed thousands of beings from different worlds now looked like a broken toy. "Sir," called a second-in-command, "I am reading life signs on multiple decks, but something is strange." "What do you mean?" Zethkar asked, checking his plasma rifle one more time. "The Void Swarm is still there, but they are not advancing. It looks like they are being held back somehow." Zethkar's 4 eyes narrowed. Nothing held back the Void Swarm. They attacked until everything was destroyed, or they were all dead. There was no middle ground with these creatures. The boarding party moved through the damaged station carefully. Their heavy boots echoed in the empty corridors. Emergency lights flashed red, and the air tasted of smoke and fear. They expected to find crystal monsters around every corner. Instead, they found something much more surprising. The sound at them first, the rapid banging of projectile weapons. Not the clean hum of energy weapons that most civilized species use, but the crude noise of chemical explosives pushing metal bullets. Then they heard voices speaking in a language none of them recognized. "This way," Zethkar whispered to his squad. They moved toward the sound of fighting, weapons ready. What they found in the medical bay made Zethkar stop in his tracks. A creature he had never seen before was kneeling next to a badly wounded Talon Lord warrior. The creature was small, barely reaching Zethkar's chest, with pink skin and strange hair on top of its head. It wore simple clothes and had no visible armor or weapons. But that was not the shocking part. The shocking part was that this small creature was performing surgery while a battle raged just outside the door. Void drones were cutting through the walls with plasma fire. The metal was glowing red-hot, and pieces were falling from the ceiling. The air itself seemed to be burning. Yet the small creature's hands were perfectly steady as it worked on the wounded warrior. "Excuse me," Zethkar said in the common galactic language. The creature looked up briefly. Its eyes were a strange blue color that Zethkar had never seen before. "Oh, hello. Are you Coalition? Good. Can you hold this steady while I finish closing this artery?" Zethkar stared in amazement. A void drone plasma blasted the wall just 2 meters away, sending hot metal flying through the air. The small creature did not even flinch. "I am Commander Zethkar of the Coalition Defense Force," he said, still trying to understand what he was seeing. "Who are you?" "Medic First Class Mio Park, Earth Defense Force," the creature replied, not looking up from his work. "Hold this steady, please. This warrior will die if I do not stop the bleeding in the next few minutes." Zethkar had no choice but to help. As he held the medical instruments, he watched in fascination. The human's hands moved with perfect precision despite the chaos around them. More plasma blasts hit the walls. and somewhere in the distance, they could hear the terrible screeching sounds that void drones made when they attacked. "How can you stay so calm?" Zefkar asked. Miho looked confused for a moment. "Calm? This is standard field surgery. We train for much worse conditions than this." He went back to his work. "There. That should hold. He will be fine if we can get him to a proper medical facility." Before Zefkar could ask more questions, another sound reached them. It was an explosion, but not from enemy weapons. This was bigger, more controlled. The whole station shook, and through the damaged walls, they could see a bright flash of light. "What was that?" one of Zefkar's warriors asked. Miho smiled. The first emotion Zefkar had seen him show. That would be Private Suri. She has been working on a surprise for our crystal friends. Through his communication device, they heard a young female voice. "Medical Bay, this is Demolition Team Alpha. The Hive ship is down. Repeat, the Hive ship is neutralized." Zefkar could not believe what he was hearing. A single human had destroyed a Void Swarm Hive ship? These massive vessels were heavily armored and protected by dozens of fighter drones. It usually took an entire coalition battle group to destroy just one. "How?" he asked. Miho was already packing up his medical supplies. Mining explosives and creative thinking. Suri is very good at finding weak spots. The real shock came when Commander Zefkar followed the humans into the lower levels of Kepler Station. The Void Swarm had taken control of the maintenance tunnels, turning the narrow passages into death traps. These underground areas were perfect for crystal creatures, dark, cramped spaces where their razor-sharp bodies could cut through enemies easily. Most coalition forces avoided tunnel fighting. It was too dangerous. The smart thing to do was seal the tunnels and wait for the enemy to come out. But the humans had a different plan. Zefkar watched from behind cover as squad leader Deho gathered his team in a small equipment room. There were only 8 humans, all looking very young and small compared to the alien warriors Zefkar was used to seeing. They carried simple weapons, metal projectile rifles, and chemical explosives that seemed primitive compared to coalition energy weapons. "Listen up," Deho said in a quiet voice. "The crystal bugs have taken tunnel sections C through F. They are using the main ventilation shaft to move between levels." He pointed to a simple map drawn on the wall. "Yuna, I want you to take Team 2 through the water recycling pipes. Stay quiet until you reach Junction 7. Zefkar was amazed. The humans were planning to split up their small force and attack through multiple routes. This went against all military training. Coalition doctrine said to keep forces together for maximum firepower. "Jiho, take Team 1 through the old mining shafts," Deo continued. "The crystal creatures are too big to follow you there. Set charges at the support points." He marked several places on the map. "When you hear my signal, bring down the ceiling in Section D." A young female human named Hyrie raised her hand. "What about the civilians trapped in Section E? If we collapse D, they will be cut off." Deho smiled. "That is where Sunho comes in. He will use the garbage disposal system to reach them. It is not big enough for the void drones, but he can fit." Zefkar's eyes widened. These humans were planning to crawl through waste pipes and mining tunnels, like they were walking down a normal corridor. Any other species would consider this beneath their dignity or too dangerous to attempt. "Sir," one of Zefkar's own warriors whispered, "should we stop them? This plan is suicide." But before Zefkar could answer, the humans were already moving. They split into their teams and disappeared into different openings in the walls. There was no hesitation, no fear. They moved like water flowing around obstacles. Zefkar decided to follow Team 1 through the mining shafts. He had to crawl on his hands and knees to fit in the narrow tunnels, his thick armor scraping against the metal walls. Behind him, his warriors complained about the tight space and the smell of old mining equipment. The humans ahead of them moved silently and quickly. They seemed to know exactly where they were going, even though the tunnels were dark and confusing. Jiho used hand signals to communicate with his team, and they responded instantly. Then they heard the first sound of contact. Through the thin walls, the screeching of void drones echoed from the main tunnels. But something was wrong with the sounds. Usually, when the crystal creatures attacked, There were screams of pain and terror from their victims. This time, the screeching sounded angry and confused. "They are not finding what they expect," Jiho whispered to his team. Through his communication device, Zefkar heard reports from the other human teams. Yuna's voice came through clearly. "Water tunnel team in position. The bugs are trying to follow us, but they keep getting stuck in the narrow pipes." Then Suno's voice, "Garbage route clear. Found 12 civilians in Section E. They are scared but unhurt. Beginning evacuation now." Zefkar was starting to understand. The humans were not just moving through the tunnels randomly. They were forcing the void swarm to chase them into spaces where the crystal creatures could not fight effectively. The large, rigid bodies of the aliens were getting trapped in pipes and shafts that the flexible humans could move through easily. "Now!" Deo's voice came through the communicator. Jiho pressed a button on a small device. The explosions were not loud, but they were perfectly placed. The ceiling of Section D came down in a controlled collapse, sealing off the main tunnel the void swarm had been using. But the humans were not finished. Through his communication system, Zefkar heard Yuna's team opening the water recycling valves. Thousands of gallons of cold recycling fluid flooded into the lower tunnels where the remaining void drones were trapped. The crystal creatures could survive in the vacuum of space, but the sudden temperature change made their bodies brittle. When Deo's team emerged from the mining shafts and opened fire with their projectile weapons, the frozen void drones shattered like glass. The entire operation took less than 30 minutes. When it was over, the tunnel system was clear of enemies, all the civilians were safe, and not a single human had been injured. Zefkar climbed out of the mining shaft, his armor dented and scratched from the tight passage. His warriors looked exhausted and frustrated. They were used to fighting in open space with advanced weapons and superior firepower. "How?" he asked Deo simply. The human squad leader was checking his equipment and preparing for the next mission. "We use what we have. The station systems, the environment, the enemy's own size against them." He looked at Zefkar with those strange blue eyes. "Every battlefield tells you how to win. You just have to listen." After the battle was won, the surviving defenders gathered in the station's main dining hall. The void swarm had been completely destroyed, and repair crews were already working to fix the damaged sections of Kepler Station. Coalition officers from different species sat together, sharing food and celebrating their victory. Commander Zefkar found himself sitting at a table with several human soldiers. They had invited him to join them for something they called a victory drink. The humans were passing around bottles of a brown liquid they said was called beer. Zefkar tried it and found it had a strange bitter taste, but it was not unpleasant. "So, Commander," said Captain Kyung, a middle-aged human with gray hair and kind eyes, "what did you think of your first battle with humans?" Zefkar was still trying to process everything he had witnessed. "Your tactics were unusual. I have never seen anything like them." The humans around the table laughed, but not in a mean way. Private Suri, the young woman who had destroyed the hive ship, smiled and said, "Unusual? That was pretty standard stuff for us." "Standard?" Zefkar's eyes focused on her. "You destroyed a heavily armored enemy vessel using mining explosives. How is that standard?" "Well," Suri said, taking a drink from her bottle, "you work with what you have available. The mining charges were right there in the equipment storage. The hive ship had to get close to deploy its drones. Simple math, really." Another human, Corporal Juno, nodded in agreement. "Back on Earth, we call it improvising. Making the best of a bad situation." "Tell me about Earth," Zefkar said. He was genuinely curious about these strange creatures who fought so differently from every other species he knew. "What would you like to know?" asked Dr. Nari, a civilian scientist who had been helping coordinate the evacuation efforts during the battle. "Your military history," Zefkar replied. "How long have humans been fighting wars?" The humans looked at each other, and several of them started laughing again. "How long have we been fighting wars?" Captain Kyung repeated. "That's like asking how long we've been breathing." Dr. Nari pulled out a small electronic device and activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air above the table. Pictures of human soldiers from different time periods, weapons, vehicles, and battlefields. This is from our most recent major conflict, she said, pointing to images of humans in green uniforms fighting in thick forests. The Third Global War ended about 50 years ago. Before that, we had the Second Global War, which lasted 6 years and involved almost every nation on our planet. Zefkar stared at the images. He saw massive metal vehicles, flying machines dropping explosives, and thousands of human soldiers moving across vast battlefields. Your entire planet was at war? Most of it, Nari confirmed. About 60 million humans died in that war. But we also developed incredible new technologies while fighting. Radar systems, rocket engines, computers, nuclear power, all created during wartime. 60 million? Zefkar could barely comprehend such numbers. The largest battle in Coalition history had involved maybe 50,000 beings total. Oh, that was just one war, Juno said casually. We have had hundreds of major wars throughout our history. Maybe thousands if you count all the smaller ones. Dr. Nari changed the holographic display to show a timeline stretching back thousands of years. Zefkar saw images of humans fighting with simple metal weapons, then more advanced guns, then the massive technological conflicts of recent centuries. We have been fighting each other since before we had written language, Nari explained. Every major advance in human technology has come from military necessity. Better weapons, better armor, better ways to move troops and supplies. But why? Zefkar asked. Why do you fight each other so much? The humans were quiet for a moment. Captain Kyung finally answered. Resources, territory, ideas, religion, politics. Sometimes we fight because we disagree about how people should live. Sometimes we fight because we want what someone else has. He shrugged. It is not something we're proud of, but it is part of who we are. The strange thing is, Dr. Nari added, when we are not fighting each other, we are incredibly good at working together. Like today, humans from 12 different nations fought side by side, without any problems. Zefkar studied the timeline again. So many conflicts. How do you keep track of them all? We have entire universities dedicated to studying military history, Nari said. Students spend years learning about famous battles, great generals, successful tactics. It is considered an important part of education. Private Suri leaned forward. My grandfather fought in the African campaign during the Second Global War. He used to tell me stories about improvised explosives and surprise attacks. That is where I learned some of my tricks. Your family teaches warfare? Zefkar was amazed. Most human families have military stories, Captain Kyung explained. War has touched almost every human life in some way. We learn about it from our parents and grandparents. Zefkar sat back in his chair, trying to understand what he was hearing. These humans had been perfecting the art of warfare for thousands of years. They had fought each other with increasing sophistication, developing new technologies and tactics with each conflict. No wonder you are so good at it, he said quietly. Good at what? Juno asked. Fighting, adapting, turning everything into a weapon. Zefkar looked around the table at these small, seemingly harmless creatures. You have been preparing for war since before you could travel to the stars. Back in the present, Commander Zefkar finished his story and looked around the silent debriefing room. The other alien commanders sat perfectly still, their faces showing confusion and worry. Captain Tissender's large brain pulsed with a dim blue light as she tried to process what she had heard. General Vorthon was the first to speak. His golden feathers were standing straight up, which meant he was very disturbed. Commander Zefkar, are you saying we should avoid all contact with these humans? They sound extremely dangerous. No, Zefkar replied firmly. I am saying exactly the opposite. He stood up and activated the holographic display in the center of the table. Images appeared showing star maps, fleet positions, and threat assessments from across Coalition space. Look at our current situation, Zefkar said, pointing to red markers scattered across the display. The Devourer fleets are getting bolder. They have attacked 3 more systems in the past month. Unknown ships are probing our outer borders. Strange signals are coming from the dark space beyond the galaxy's edge. The other commanders nodded grimly. Everyone knew that the coalition was facing more threats than ever before. Their traditional enemies were becoming more aggressive, and new dangers were appearing regularly. We have been fighting the same way for centuries, Zeth continued. Bigger ships, stronger shields, more powerful weapons. But our enemies adapt too. The old methods are not working anymore. Captain Tevias mental voice filled the room. What are you suggesting, Commander? That we ally ourselves with these terrifying humans? Yes, Zeth said without hesitation, and I will tell you why. He changed a holographic display to show tactical formations and battle plans. I have spent the last 3 months working with human military advisors. Together, we have developed new strategies that combine their adaptive thinking with our technological advantages. The display showed mixed units of human and alien forces working together. Small human teams moved through enemy positions while larger alien ships provided cover fire. Human engineers modified coalition weapons to work in ways their original designers had never imagined. Watch the simulation, Zeth said. The hologram showed a battle between coalition forces and a devourer fleet. In the first version, traditional coalition tactics resulted in heavy losses and eventual retreat. In the second version, with human-influenced strategies, the same battle ended in complete victory with minimal casualties. How is this possible? Asked one of the Crystal People, their voice like wind through caves. Humans think about warfare differently than we do, Zeth explained. We rely on superior technology and overwhelming force. They rely on creativity and adaptation. When you combine both approaches, the results are remarkable. He showed them more examples. Human soldiers had taught coalition engineers how to turn mining equipment into weapons. Human tacticians had developed new formations that confused enemy sensors. Human medics had created field hospitals that could operate in conditions that would stop most alien medical teams. The humans are already proving their value, Zeth continued. Last week, a joint human Velcrin patrol destroyed a Devourer scouting force using tactics that no pure coalition unit could have managed. The humans identified weaknesses in enemy ship design that our computers had missed. General Vorthon looked thoughtful. But can we trust them? You said yourself that they've been fighting each other for thousands of years. That is exactly why we can trust them, Zeth replied. They understand the cost of war better than any species in the galaxy. They know that fighting your allies is wasteful and stupid. When humans commit to an alliance, they honor it completely. He showed them historical data about human military alliances. During their Second Global War, dozens of human nations worked together against a common enemy. They shared resources, coordinated strategies, and supported each other even when it was difficult. Some of those alliances still exist today, hundreds of years later. Captain THY leaned forward, her brain pulsing faster. What exactly are you proposing, Commander? Full military integration, Zeth said. Human officers in coalition fleets. Coalition technology shared with human forces. Joint training programs. Combined research and development. He paused and looked directly at each commander. And fast-track membership for Earth in the coalition. The room erupted in surprised sounds. The Crystal People hummed loudly. General Vorthon's feathers fluffed out completely. Several other aliens started talking at once in their native languages. Zeth held up his hand for silence. I know this seems sudden, but we do not have time for the normal 100-year membership process. The threats we face are growing stronger every day. We need human creativity and adaptability now, not in a century. He activated one final display. This one showed projected enemy movements and estimated coalition response capabilities. The numbers were not encouraging. Within 5 years, we will face a major invasion from outside the galaxy. Zeth said quietly. Our current forces will not be enough to stop it, but with human allies, we have a real chance of victory. The alien commander studied the projections in silence. Finally, General Vorthon spoke. You really believe these humans can make such a difference? Zeth smiled, showing his sharp teeth. General, I have seen what humans can do when they're defending their friends. The galaxy's predators should be very, very afraid. "Then we vote," said Captain THY Sandra. "All in favor of immediate alliance with Earth?" Every hand, claw, tentacle, and crystalline appendage in the room rose into the air. The age of human-alien cooperation had begun.